Today's topic, loan officer retention strategies. I'm thrilled to have Pat Polson, Senior Vice President at Truist Bank. Pat has had a long career in mortgage banking, starting out back in the days with Central Caroline Bank. Hi, Pat, I'm so excited to have you today to talk about this important topic about retention. Loan officer retention has to be the hottest topic within mortgage banking, as you well know. Every manager talks about it. And certainly it is a key component when you look at our turnover numbers as an industry, they still are high for
Right.
sure. So talk a little bit about kind of how you see it and we'll talk about that in a second. But I want to kind of jump in first to ask, how'd you get into our mortgage world? Talk about also what you see out there that lenders really need to be thinking about. So how'd you get into the mortgage banking world?
Wow, I kind of stumbled into it from, 28 years ago this year. So I've been with my organization 30, and I started out in retail branch banking. I knew a couple things. I knew I loved sales, and I knew I helped folks with home financing, and I couldn't really do that with first mortgage. I was doing a lot of equity lines and equity loans, and I
Sure.
thought, gosh, maybe I should try mortgage. How hard and how much different could it be? And then I learned. So 28 years later, I love it, and I'm still in it.
Yeah, small world. We all have the same story. We kind of fell into it. So talk about, especially since you have certainly been in the field for a long time and talking about the issue of what you see out there from the customer standpoint. And also we'll go a deeper dive when we talk about the loan officer and retention. So what do you see out there you think lenders should be thinking about? I'm sure AI must be one of your topics.
It's definitely AI. Yeah, that's number one on the list. And I like to refer to it as augmented intelligence as opposed to
Sure.
artificial intelligence because I don't think it's going to completely take our jobs. I think it's going to help us become a lot more efficient and serve the clients better. The cost per loan in the industry is still super high, right? So I think lenders are really continuing to lean into AI. How can they leverage that a little bit better to bring that cost of loan down, not necessarily through job replacement, but augmenting the rules and the tasks and the compliance measures that we have to go through as an industry to really get better and bring that cost of loan down. And then from a loan officer perspective, how can you better leverage AI to create agents, right? And how can those agents help your overall business to become more efficient in what you do every single day? I'm still trying to find more than 24 hours in a day. I haven't figured it out yet. So if I can use AI to get a few minutes, few hours here and there, that's really going to help.
Well, we'll have to have you come back and talk about the agent world for the loan officer because I agree with you. It is a game changer and it will separate loan officers that are willing to do it and versus that won't do it. So that's another story unto itself. So, well, let's talk about the loan officer retention strategies that you see. And
Mhm.
I think it probably starts from the beginning because I've heard you talk about it before. So, talk about how you see the loan officer retention strategies that actually work.
Yeah, so I think it's twofold. I can touch on two pieces. The first one is, like you said, it's recruiting. So you got to start it out right with the right talent. And I'm a firm believer in, hire the right talent, not all the talent out there, right? The right
Yeah.
talent that fits your organization. And I think it starts with a couple things. Number one, you have to understand their why. I think sometimes sales managers arc to, well, we can pay them more. Here, our comp plan is a little bit better. It's not always about money with folks. Sometimes it's about the support that they receive at the current company they're at. Sometimes it's
Mhm.
their career path. So if you can really sort of uncover their why for why they want to maybe make a change, and if that aligns with your organizational goals and what you can offer them, I think that's a good place to start. And that'll create a longer term individual on the once they join you because they know why they're coming over and you know why they're coming over and what that path might look like for them.
So, Pat, why are managers so unwilling or whatever you want to call it, or hesitant to want to know the why? Because you're right, they all step into talking about money and they start talking about products and how our systems are great and we love our customers. Why do you think that happens?
Well, I think sometimes we fall into the cardinal rule or cardinal sin, if you will, of sales, which is you should ask questions first and then talk about yourself later, right? And I think too often we jump in with this is why we're such a great organization to join, rather than really truly uncover what's important to the candidate that you're recruiting and sort of what their long term goals are before you really jump into what you have to offer them. Because it might be completely misaligned, right? They may want to do reverse mortgages, and you might be at an organization that doesn't offer reverse mortgages, and that's a really quick coffee, right? That's one cup, and then you're gone, and you wish them well, and it's not something that's going to be good. So I find it takes more than, and it also takes more than one meeting. I think the best talent to hire, you're not going to get them to commit most of the time at the very first time that you meet with them. So that's another important fact. It's a journey. It's not a sprint.
Well, it's a great point, and that's another topic unto itself. Why do we slip into this all the time? And you're exactly right that it does happen quite a bit. So once they join you, and I know we're going to talk about that a lot today, what is the effective ways to make sure that that period when they're really deciding, did they make the right choice, and is it really working out correctly? So what do you see actually works in that beginning period, or what people call the onboarding part?
Sure. So day one is the most important day of them at your organization, right? So you need to wow them day one. You need to surround them with all the support and that they could think of, right? So that's peer support, so peers in the office or peers on the team. It's the leadership, obviously, managers. It's tech support, it's marketing support, it's operational support. You need to introduce them to the right folks. And quite frankly, that's another piece of the recruiting that I'll mention too. When you recruit, I have kind of a rule around never go alone on recruiting, and I have this rule of three, right? So make sure that as you're recruiting them, you introduce them to other parts of the organization, like the operations manager, the processing manager, the marketing team, the sales support roles within there, so that they already know those folks, that when they start on day one, they have some familiarity with those individuals, and those individuals are coming up to wrap their arms around them and tell them how awesome it is and honored that they're joined our organization, and that they're going to be successful here.
So are you doing this in that first meeting, or is this when they're like, really, it's time for an offer letter? When are you bringing in these people?
So I always try and leave every meeting. So if sales manager is the first step, right, with the candidate, make sure they understand their why, and that they're going to be a good fit for the organization, and then leaving that meeting with the next step. If the candidate's interested and the sales manager's interested, that is the best time to set up the next step, being with one of the partners internally, whether that's the operations manager or the marketing manager or maybe a sales support manager or
Mhm.
whomever. And then that second meeting, which is with that individual, so they get to know them and ask them questions and get comfortable with the overall platform. You leave that second meeting with another follow-up step to meet someone else in the organization. So if you can have at least three people in the organization that you meet before you get to the offer stage, the candidate's going to have a lot more comfort level of trying to understand what they don't know before they
Mhm.
jump into an organization. Because I mean, let's face it, moving companies is extremely difficult. I said
Right.
I've been with the same company for 30 years. That's through three mergers. So I feel like I've moved three times.
Yeah.
But I know when people join, it's really tough to move. So the more connectivity and familiarity you can have throughout the recruiting process, and then actually see all those people day one as a wow factor is critical.
So are these meetings happening offsite, or you're bringing them into the organization to meet you there, where the ops people and all those people also are there with you? How are you actually doing that?
So most of that is virtual,
Oh,
just due to
virtual.
our geography and where we're spread
Sure.
out, right? If you have local processing in the market, that's easy, right?
Yeah.
Local marketing, but then you take that, so that's day one. But where we do make it a lot more personal is, I think, what's important about an onboarding process is not just day one, but then how do you get that group of recruits? Because generally recruits, you'll have several individuals that'll join within a month period, right? And if you
Yeah.
can couple all of those individuals together that are new from all different parts of the geography,
Hmm.
and have them come together in an offsite location for 3 to 5 days and do sort of an immersion into onboarding at the organization. They create networks amongst themselves. They feel a sense of belonging because
Sure.
they're all making a change at the same time. I think that's also very critical as part of the onboarding experience, to have that. And then you generally see a lot more of the face-to-face interaction, because it's in that centralized location somewhere within the company's geography.
So have you seen a difference in other words, how did you come to this is how we're going to do it? Or is this something you've been doing for a long time? Or talk about this day one immersion where you're obviously part of where you're getting your team partner and all of those folks. How did you come to this, and what have you seen? Has that made a difference in retention?
Yeah, I think it definitely has. It's sort of been something that we've coupled together learnings over the course of years,
Sure.
right? To say, gosh, we thought that this particular structure was good, and we realized that when a new hire came through that particular structure, they were still sort of struggling. So where do we fill in those gaps? And our organization about 5 years ago, we sort of wiped the slate clean and started from scratch, and built what we have today, which is a really great onboarding experience. We have our new hires rave about it, so it is the best I've seen in my 28 years in the mortgage business.
So talk about, all right, you've talked about that beginning period during the onboarding. And do you consider the onboarding the first 90 days, or is it the first 60 days, or when do you see that period typically, I guess, ending and where the person's up and running? And what's the timing? How do you see that working?
Yeah, really first 90 days.
It's the
So
first
we ask
90.
them to yeah, they'll create a business plan when they come on board, or they may already
Hmm.
have a business plan from where they were before that we fold in. And so you have that high touch day one, you have that 3 to 5 day on-site immersion class, if you will. And then really it's on the direct manager, whether that's a branch manager or producing sales manager, and then one level up from that as a leader as well. So a
Hmm.
lot of high touch weekly one-on-ones, the direct manager to make sure that they're checking in and ensuring that new hire is really starting to achieve, and they understand how to work within the framework of the organization to get loan production done. Another thing that I feel like we as an industry sometimes lean too heavy in is, look, compliance is important when you come on board, and all the
Hmm.
training classes and all that stuff that you need to have happen, but production is also vitally important, right? And sometimes we do compliance first and production last, and it's almost like you need to flip those or have a better
Yeah.
balance of how to do that production support day one versus compliance and training heavy day one.
Yeah, well, I agree with that 100%. And most lenders don't do it that way, as you well know. They do it the opposite. And so have you tracked, in other words, what is the typical, I guess, percentages of people that ramp up to the goals within that first 90 days? Or what does that success point look for you?
Yeah, so we actually track it for the first 18 months, quite frankly, on new hires. So we
Hmm.
take a look at 60 days in, 120 days in, 180,
Yeah.
and we kind of track it the entire path all the way through 18 months. So we tend to see good production against goals out of the gate, and we know that there's a ramp up period, right? So we don't assume that they're going to close anything for the first month, and very little based on their run rates for the second month, but we do have a ramp up period, and we track to that and review it on a monthly basis. We have pretty good ramp up on that. Not everybody hits all those metrics, and we have some that
Sure.
exceed. But where we don't have the folks that are hitting those metrics, we really try to coach and understand, what's different about what
Hmm.
we and they expected coming in, and how can we kind of get them up and
Hmm.
producing faster and feeling more confident potentially.
So are you surveying these new recruits to find out what works? It sounds like you're doing some of that. And what is the likelihood of them being kind of point blank honest with it? I'm just curious because in that first period, they're always thinking about, did I make the right choice?
Yeah, so a team that runs our onboarding
Hmm.
program actually does go back and survey new
Okay.
hires
Hmm.
2, 3, 4 months after they've joined, outside of the sales managers. So they get,
Hmm.
one thing I've known about mortgage sales professionals in the last 28 years is they're generally not shy, right? So
No, they're not. I
they're
was
they're
right.
they're they're more than willing to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's why I say we get rave reviews, but we also get some feedback on, gosh, I wish you would have done this differently, and we built that into our process over the last 5 years as well in certain
Hmm.
areas. So it's the feedback loop is vital, for
Hmm.
them as they're joining, and I feel like it also gives them a sense of exposure into the culture, further exposure into the culture of the organization, right? So if you ask for feedback, you put it into practice, or if you can't put it into practice, you tell them why. That creates retention in and of itself.
True. And so, is there any other changes that you've seen actually that you think have been really important that maybe most lenders aren't doing? And then we'll move into talking about retention for those currently with you.
The only other thing around retention, I'm going to go back to the recruiting piece for a
Mm-hmm.
moment. The other thing that you have to be intentional about is making sure that their business model. I mentioned it earlier, using the reverse mortgage analogy. Someone that does that, joining a company that doesn't offer it, obviously it's a no-brainer. But you got to make sure that the business is transferable from their previous company to your company, because if it's not fully transferable, then then they're going to struggle, and you're doing them a disservice by not ensuring that you're talking about a plan to
Right.
replace that business that's not transferable. And if they can play multiple positions, and they can play, and what I mean by multiple positions is different referral sources, multiple referral sources in the
Yeah.
marketplace. They're not just this is my only referral pathway. A lot of times they're going to be a lot more successful. Obviously, I think about, I'm an NFL football fan, so it's getting ready to be free agent time, right? And that's sort of
Sure.
what recruiting can be, right? You're hiring free
Right.
agents from another team, and you want to make sure they're going to have a higher value if they can play multiple positions for an NFL team, just like a loan originator that has multiple referral pathways that they can play, or multiple positions they can play, is going
Mm-hmm.
to be more valuable to the organization.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love talking to you because I'm also an NFL fan. So I use that analogy all the time. It's draft period. Okay. Well, let's move from the onboarding part to the retention component for those that are currently with you, because certainly what I hear from loan officers a lot is that they feel either lied to in the recruiting process, or they feel that if they've been there a long time that they've been ignored. What's some of the things that you have seen work to kind of address those issues?
A couple things. Number one, you can't just leave them alone, right? So even if they're top producers, I talked about doing weekly one-on-ones right when they join. That weekly one-on-one, at some point after they're onboarded and they're a little bit mature in their ramp up with the direct sales manager, that should still be there. Maybe it's a bi-weekly one-on-one, maybe it's a monthly one-on-one, but you got to spend the time with the individuals and not just assume because they're really busy and doing a lot of production that they don't want to check in. They really do. So I think there's an opportunity to learn from that. That creates retention.
Sure.
Making sure that another thing I've seen done, and my organization does it, is we develop councils of peers. So we
Hmm.
actually invite loan officers and producing sales managers in the organization to serve for a year or two on a council. It could be a product council. It could be just an originations council, but it's a small group, so it creates that connectivity across a geography, and it's almost think of it as a feedback loop. They get to
Right.
see things before they go live, so we can bounce ideas off of them. They can give feedback to us. We've gotten some really great reviews out of that, and we've been doing it for several years. I think that's another retention tool. If you've got individuals in the organization that are good talent that you want to fold into sort of those small focus groups or councils,
Hmm.
and it's not a one and done. It's got to be something that's got some structure around it, and
Hmm.
that you'll lean on them for a good period of time. That's also been a great retention tool for us as well.
So when you think about, and I'm glad you brought this up because it really is a big issue that I see, that many senior managers think, well, a top producer doesn't need that interaction because they're obviously doing their thing and they're successful. But that does seem to be the group that people basically ignore and think, well,
Mm-hmm.
they're doing their thing. And so, which is obviously a big mistake. And that's why, all of these loan officers today, even whether you're a good one or a bad one, you're getting recruited. It doesn't seem to matter. So,
Sure.
and of course, you don't want to lose the big ones either. So, is there some way that you enforce that the interaction occurs to make sure these people are in the swing of things?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think inspecting
Hmm.
inspecting what you expect, right? That's an age-old saying. But think of it this way: so if I have a top performer that we're asking the direct sales manager to have a one-on-one on a biweekly or monthly basis, hey, a good inspection point is for a manager two levels up to reach out to that top
Sure.
performer and just kind of check in with them as well. You'll be able to uncover real quick whether those regular meetings are happening and they feel like they're getting the support from their direct manager that they expect as well.
So when you look at the retention strategy, one of the things that I consider mystery of life, and of course we'll have to have you come back and talk about this topic, is that managers tend to spend their time of the interaction component with the low performers and the other folks get ignored. And so instead of firing these people, we just try to install something that's probably missing. And so what's your thoughts on that? And how do you kind of address that so that doesn't happen? That tends to be what you see.
Yeah, so I think there's a balance there, right? You need to spend
Sure.
time with your top performers. Those tend, in my experience, those tend to be more fun interactions, than dealing with your lower performers, right? But the lower performers, the lower performers, you want those individuals to be successful, but there is a
Sure.
point where you got to draw the line in the sand and say, look, the other age old saying, I've led the horse to water, but they're not drinking, right? So sometimes you just got to do the hard thing. You got to have the hard conversation and cut bait and help that low performer maybe find what their calling is at another organization. And that is, or potentially another role within your organization, right? And that's
Sure.
in my opinion very gratifying and satisfying too, because you're helping that individual. Look, people generally don't like to raise their hand and say I quit, right? So sometimes
Yeah.
they need someone to tell them that
Not,
they're quitting that role and they're moving to something else. And I've had individuals where that's happened in the past, and I've seen them down the road, and I've actually gotten a thank you or two because they couldn't do it on their own. They needed someone to help push them to a different role or a different
right.
organization. So you need to understand that it's okay in that regard, and you're actually being kind to those individuals, believe it or not, even though those conversations are very hard. And then spend the time with your top producers. Go out on sales calls with your top producers. Those are energizing. Those are fun. That's the part of the business that I love the most personally.
Yeah. Well, me too also. So, well, we have so much more to cover, but we're down to the last few minutes. A couple takeaways for our listeners today, though, when it comes to retention.
Yeah, so I would say make sure you understand the why during the recruiting process, right? Make sure that business is transferable over to your organization. Be brutally honest about who your organization is and who your organization isn't, right? You can't be all things to all people, and you want to make sure you're setting them up for success. And then when you get into the onboarding experience, day one, you got to wow them day one. There's no chance to have another day one, right? So do that, and then create. If you don't have a formal onboarding process in class that's in person, where they can build that connectivity with others that have just joined the organization as well, build that out. Invest the time, invest the money. It will come back to you in spades, in my opinion, through retention of those individuals long term.
So, Pat, how can any of our listeners contact you if they want to discuss this more?
Absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. I'm also, you can LinkedIn's the best. So I would go that route.
He definitely answers his emails and he definitely answers the
I do that
LinkedIn.
too.
Yeah, you do that both. So I'm excited to talk to you about this topic. I have to come back and talk about some other topics because I think you hit on a lot that are really important to our listeners. And I want to thank you for joining with us today to share your thoughts on this. And certainly, I think they were excellent what you had to share. And I want to thank our listeners and certainly sign up for our weekly podcast. We'd love to have you join us. Thanks so much, Pat.
Thanks, Pat. Nice seeing you today.
That's a wrap for this episode. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your team. Want more proven sales strategies? Visit patsherlock.com for expert resources, coaching, and sales training. Until next time, keep selling smarter and not harder.